Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. Good morning or good afternoon from wherever you're joining us. Today, we're talking about building trust from source to ship. We have a couple of experts here on the missing link in your golden path. We're going to talk about SBOMs and CRA. But more of that in a second. So my name is Claire Speedy and I'm the Senior Growth Marketing Manager here at Cloudsmith. Before we dive in, just a quick introduction about Cloudsmith. So for anyone who's new, it's a fully managed cloud native artifact management platform that helps organizations securely store, distribute, and govern their software supply chain from end to end. So today's webinar, basically, we're going to take it's ourselves, Cloudsmith, with Steve here from Octopus Deploy. And we're going to explore what it really takes to build a golden path that works from artifact creation all the way through to deployment. So we're going to discuss how to design workflows that developers want to use, how to maintain artifact integrity and provenance throughout the pipeline, and how to embed security and compliance requirements without slowing teams down. So today we're really addressing the problem that right, so you generate an SBOM, but what happens after that? Compliance checks, security checks. So we're going to talk through the practical end-to-end process of doing that. But before we jump in, I thought we'd just do quick intros. So we have Ralph McTaggart, who is our principal engineer here at Cloudsmith, and I'll throw it over to Ralph to introduce himself.
Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. So yeah, my name's Ralph. I am principal engineer, as Clara said. I've worked a lot on our new UI and web app and APIs, but more recently I've moved on to our security feature set, which is kind of more in line with my background. I spent a long time in cybersecurity. So I work on our policy management and security ingestion.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you, Ralph. And next Cloudsmither is Christian Garcia, and he is our Senior Customer Success Manager. And I'll throw it over to him for an intro.
Thanks, Claire. Yeah, hi, everyone. Name's Christian Garcia, Senior CSM, as Claire mentioned, helping our top enterprise customers see success with the Cloudsmith platform and make sure they're maximizing pretty much everything within the platform. And definitely, I'd say my specialty is also in cybersecurity. I do also have a cybersecurity background. So yeah, pleasure to meet everyone.
Thank you, Christian. And finally, Steve from Octopus Deploy. He's the Director of Developer Relations over there. So I'll throw over to Steve to do an introduction.
Hey, everyone. Yeah, my name's Steve. I work at Octopus Deploy. I've been in software for about 3 decades now. Before that, I was actually in a compliance team. And I now work at Octopus Deploy, and I'm involved in the research here. I'm a big fan of research. I follow things like the DORA research projects. I'm a CD Foundation governing board member, contributor to the CNCF platform engineering group. We're working on maturity models and assessments there at the moment. And I've done some original research into things like GitOps, platform engineering, and of course, AI.
Thank you, Steve. That's great. So as you can see, we have a lot of security and compliance expertise here in the room. Just a bit of housekeeping before we begin. So we were recording the session and you will receive it tomorrow, just if you want to play it back or if you missed anything. You're all muted by default, but you'll notice on the right-hand side, there's a Q&A box. So pop anything into there. If we have time at the end, I hope that we do have time, pop a question into there and we'll do like a live Q&A at the end. If you're having any like audio or visual issues, try refreshing the browser. See how I said refreshing the browser, not off and on. Also try that too. Yeah, so if you're having any issues, just try refreshing the browser and that should work. Okay, so the housekeeping out of the way. My name is Claire. So I said before, Senior Growth Marketing Manager here at Cloudsmith. So it's my responsibility to drill down into what are the problems developers are having with their software supply chain and how can Cloudsmith best fit and best offer a solution for those issues. Okay, So what we're going to start with is what is Golden Pass? So we are hoping that everybody knows what Golden Pass are, but we're not assuming. So what is the difference then between Golden Pass and paved pass? And then we're going to move into adoption. So Golden Pass deployment and adoption, making it predictable and repeatable. It's all well and good having Golden Pass, but if you don't make them as easy as possible and as ingrained into the process, then nobody's going to use them. And then we're going to pass it on to like security, so software supply chain security. So the new standard, SBOMs and the CRA. It's not just about generating an SBOM, it's about what you do afterwards. And then finally, we'll just do a quick closing the loop, how that full end-to-end process from Cloudsmith and artifact management, and then through to Octopus Deploy in deployment. Okay. So Cloudsmith, just a bit of a background, artifact authority, Octopus Deploy, deployment authority. The first question, actually, before we begin, we have a couple of polls that I'm just going to throw into the ether. Feel free to complete whenever suits. So the first one, which best describes your team's current relationship with your Golden Path? So we'll publish this. So that poll is now open. Again, it should be in the right-hand side. Feel free to vote whenever suits. Okay. So first question then. We often hear the term paved paths and Golden Path used interchangeably, but from an artifact management perspective, what is the missing link that turns a simple suggestion into a functional Golden Path?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that, Claire. Yeah, before I get into what, golden paths versus paved paths, just to kind of preface, if you haven't already heard the term of golden path in relation to platform engineering, you're definitely sure to encounter it. I mean, it's definitely a hot topic right now. It's essentially a pre-configured paved road that provides an end-to-end workflow for your developers. So typically that's enabled via like a internal developer platform. Think of like Backstage, it's a pretty popular one that we see customers leveraging. But when we kind of drill a little bit more into paved versus golden paths, it's a good question. It gets down to the heart of how platform teams really view or actually move from guidance to actual enforcement. So I like to think of a paved path as like guidance in terms of a workflow. And I'll give an example shortly. While a golden path is enforcement backed by trust. So like a paved path, for example, might say, hey, this is the recommended way to build and deploy your application, but you still might have teams or developers bypass it, right? That template exists, but it's not actually enforced. So for example, a platform team, they might publish a CI template, that includes dependency scanning, SBOM generation, some other checks, maybe some other, SCA through Sneak, for example. But a developer could still create their own pipeline that kind of skips those checks and those very important checks. It could pull dependencies directly from the public internet through npm.js or PyPy as opposed to Cloudsmith. So, tying it back to artifact management, I think the missing link, right, that turns your paved path to golden path is that artifact governance. When artifacts, can flow through a centralized control plane like Cloudsmith, you're already enforcing immutability, vulnerability policies, malware checks, license checks, and provenance tracking before anything is allowed downstream, right? Allowed to be deployed. So again, we're seeing a lot of our customers in the industry kind of look towards the artifact management repository or artifact management, towards or becoming the control point of the supply chain. So again, instead of like a pipeline enforcing policy directly, you have the actual artifact repository instead of the pipeline enforcing those trust checks.
Yeah, thank you for that, Christian. And it kind of leads us on to the next question. So thank you for that. So when we talk about the path, it does imply like a journey. So where does the golden path usually break down for teams that are just starting to move away from manual developer workflows, those manual developer workflows that you talked about?
Yeah, I think this is interesting because if we think about, like, if you've ever been to like a park, there are always the pathways that have been provided by the people that built the park. And then whenever there's a corner, you'll see where people have cut through and cut across. And I think it can be tempting when you're trying to build platforms to look at that shortcut and think, oh, that's how we should encode this. But one of the points of a platform is that we actually want to build a better pathway than that shortcut. So we don't really want to be skipping steps. We want to just be making them so easy that you're happy to follow them. So I think that can be one of the initial trip hazards, is that you take what people are already doing and just kind of try and standardize that instead of building something better that is going to kind of lift everyone up. And I think alongside that, we typically form platform teams from the people who have been going beyond feature development and working on things like pipelines and deployments and observability. And one of the mistakes we can sometimes make there is they're kind of the experts, and it's quite tempting for them to want to impose their view of the world on the developer teams, which sometimes means they're a bit disconnected from what the developers really need. So they're the right people. We should be using these kind of more expert pipeline builders, but we need to make sure that they stay super connected to the developer teams, understand their pains, solve the real problems that they have. And that's why I always argue for platforms to be optional, because that's the strongest signal that you can have that your platform teams are understanding the developers and what they need, is that adoption number. If no one wants to use the platform, it's probably because it's being built, in isolation of those conversations.
Yeah. And that, there's obviously a level of complexity. So deployment is where the golden paths meet reality. But how do we ensure the automation we build into the path actually reflects the complexity of production environments without becoming a bottleneck?
Yeah, I think one of the hardest things about platform engineering is that we're going to want to build wide, because we know holistic platforms are better. They perform better. The DORA research tells us that. So the temptation is to try and build something really wide and tackle everything, and it becomes something that we actually can't maintain because it's too big. So there's a bit of discipline involved in being super focused on what problems your platform is going to solve and making sure that you solve them well and keep updating them. So that's super important. Once you actually succeed with that, then the chances are investment will increase, and then you can solve even more problems. But if you go too wide too soon, I think you spread yourself too thin. And in terms of complexity, I think it's tempting to take all of the complexity from the stream-aligned teams, the feature development teams, kind of shift it to the platform team, which then means they just get all of the cognitive burden of it all. But actually, we should be looking, can we remove some of this complexity, or can we push it down so that it's not something that the actual developers or the platform team handle? Can we push it down into the tools and remove the complexity entirely? I think that's one of the key problems with complexity. Is it's quite common for it to just, it's not the developer problem anymore. It's now the platform engineer's problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good segue into how Cloudsmith and Octopus Deploy work. So how does maintaining artifact integrity and provenance in Cloudsmith act as a green light for an automated deployment in Octopus?
Yeah, great question. I think the key concept there is like provenance and trust signals being kind of built in. We're seeing in modern, delivery pipelines that, the deployment tool shouldn't have to reevaluate whether an artifact is trustworthy, right? That should be happening at ideally the artifact registry level. In that regard, Cloudsmith becomes the system that validates the artifact integrity and provenance through, again, those vulnerability and policy checks. We record all of the metadata of the package, the security checks it's been through. to the point where once the artifact is ready for deployment, a tool like Octopus Deploy, can be confident and retrieve that artifact from Cloudsmith, with all of those checks in place, creating effectively a golden path. The goal I think many platform teams are working towards is pretty similar and simple. Build once and trust the artifact everywhere it goes. If you have to rebuild for different environments, you've already kind of broken that chain of custody. So I think that also plays a role. But if we're talking about the green light, the repository, right, acts as a traffic signal in the pipeline. So if the artifact exists in there, it's passed all the checks. We're assuming we have evidence for that. We have a paper trail. It's passed validation, and that's essentially the green light for Octopus Deploy to be automating deployment.
Awesome, man. I just want to make one quick comment based on what Steve was saying actually around the complexity. We've kind of as an industry adopted this term of shift left. And it's a nice term, like it looks really good on marketing materials. No offense, Claire, but it's a great kind of like catchy term, and most people can understand what it means really quickly. I think the problem with it is that it adds a burden. Then we've shifted everything left, and we've also shifted all that complexity left as well. And so if you're not addressing that in like an automated way, if you're not addressing that in an intelligent way, then all you've done is make people's jobs, which let's face it, are pretty hard already and pretty busy already. You've just made it harder and busier. So yeah, super important points, I think.
Yeah, I think after we shift left, you have to then shift down. You've got to, like, the complexity can't just be handed around like a hot potato. We kind of want to do something about it, make it go away, really. That's the idea. There's already loads of complexity in developing software and running it and operating it. So any complexity that we can kind of move out from that list is going to make all of your teams more effective.
Agreed. And that's actually probably a good segue. We've got another poll here. So what is the biggest friction point when introducing your developer workflows? So I'm going to publish that. That is ready for anybody to answer on the right-hand side again. And thank you we've got some good responses from which best describes your team's current relationship with your golden path. So again, we can talk about those at the end when we do a Q&A. Does anyone have anything else to add to that final point, or will we move on to sort of adoption and making golden paths an easy option?
All good.
All good. Okay. So Steve, you mentioned that the platform should be optional, but the policies are mandatory. So how do you design a golden path that is so efficient that a developer would actually feel punished by trying to go around it?
Yeah, I think this is an interesting challenge. I think because we're at an early stage of platform engineering in a lot of organizations right now, there are some factors at play that will push people to make some bad decisions. Like on day one, most of the feature teams probably aren't meeting the organization's policies, right? They're not even doing SBOM generation or vulnerability scanning. They're just missing it from their pipeline. And the temptation is to say, well, now we've built a platform that will add those things. We just want to force people to use it. And so you're kind of combining that audit of what's going on in the software world with like the solution in one giant hammer. But we try to encourage people not to do that. What we want to do is do the policy piece separately so that the teams have to meet policy, whether they decide to do that on their own or whether they opt into the platform to do it. And it's the platform team's job to make the platform so easy that the developers are queuing up, right? They're ready. They want to buy, effectively. And that means they'll be better partners, right? There's going to be some rough edges in the platform, but they will work with the platform team because they want to use it and they want to make it easier to onboard and they want to make it easier to use. If you're forcing people to use the platform, you're going to end up in a situation where everyone is just highlighting those sharp edges and saying, look, the platform's not fit for purpose. So you end up creating quite a strong conflict between the teams. And this is kind of why we invented DevOps, was to remove those kinds of conflicts. So yeah, the policies absolutely should be mandatory, and that means the platform can be optional. And you might look at models like inner sourcing so that the teams can contribute to the platform to improve those rough edges as well.
Yeah, I think that's Ralph. Do you have anything that you want to jump in with, or will I? Because I think this is we're going into, does easy ever conflict with secure? And
Yeah.
like, how do we bake security into the adoption phase so it doesn't feel like it's just like a speed bump like this?
Yeah, so like as Steve says, there's you have kind of, I don't know if it's conflicting priorities or perceived conflicting kind of priorities across different teams, and one of those, obviously, your pure security team, and product development or engineering teams. They're trying to build stuff. They're trying to build stuff really fast. They have to, meet deadlines and make investors happy and all that. And then you have security teams who want to ensure that this thing has to be secure. Like we can't be exposing ourselves to vulnerabilities or whatever. And I think, especially for a lot of engineers and platform engineers as well, but engineers in general, they kind of feel like, those two things are at odds with each other. Like it can be almost and I've worked in places before where, the security team has almost like a big stamp that says, "Oh, you can't do this," or it's a final check. They're almost like gatekeepers to something you need to access or be able to do, and like it should never be like that. So it does happen. To answer your question, Claire, just to come back, yes, there are conflicts between EAS and security, but it shouldn't be like that. And as Steve kind of hinted on as well, is that it's about baking these things into the process. The kind of golden path, the secure path, should be the one that you as a company invest in, and that should be the one that you're putting all of your resources into. Developers are usually unhappy because something is, like I say, blocked, or if something is unpredictable, if they know that or they don't know that something is going to get prevented ahead of time. Whereas I think if there's good resource management around that and building that out from day one, it just makes for an easier development experience. And like coming back to the ease and efficiency of things, like if you know that there's a secure process that backs what you're doing, whether through policy enforcement, whatever, that gives you a certain level of confidence as a developer to develop quickly. So it's actually shouldn't slow you down, should speed you up. If anything, if you have a secure process backing you, you should be faster because you have that confidence. In the same way that if you have test frameworks and whatever, you can develop faster because you have things that will catch stuff that you miss. It's exactly the same. I don't want to, and I'm speaking personally as a developer here, like I don't want to check every dependency and against some list somewhere, whatever. I just want to develop stuff and let somebody else who either knows more about it or cares more about it than me work that out. And for me, I just want to move fast and I just want to build cool stuff.
I just want to build cool stuff.
Yeah. Sums my job up.
Yeah, I want to build.
Yeah, I think just on that real quick, Ralph, you brought us some good points there. Just kind of what we're seeing in the field as well with customers is there seems to be sometimes a disconnect between platform teams and security teams, and whether implementing the security safeguards in golden paths falls on platform or infosec, whatever it may be. I just would encourage some collaboration there, like an environment of collaboration, including security or infosec early in the process, just so they're aware of of the security measures that have been put in place within the golden path for developers, and right, just involving them and kind of there tends to be like a doom and gloom kind of mentality amongst developers when they think about infosec and security. So the faster you can change that culture within your organization, I think you're really going to set yourself up for success. So just wanted to add that in.
Yeah, I think there's also an interesting win-win here where you've got your SecOps, your platform team, and your developers. And like on day 0, your SecOps team is having to go and check every separate development team. So the platform could be removing this burden to some extent as well, because all of the teams that use the platform, if the SecOps team knows that the platform is taking care of the concerns, it's going to lighten that kind of internal audit load and all of that checking. So I think there is definitely like a triple win here. All of the teams can win at the same time.
Yeah, 100%.
100%.
Right.
Cool. Do we want to move on to the CRA?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I had a bit of technical issue there with the platform, but we're back. We're back on my live. So CRA compliance and SBOMs. So this is what we talked about at the start in the agenda of going beyond just generating an SBOM. So let's talk a bit about the process. So with the Cyber Resilience Act CRA looming, visibility is no longer a luxury. So beyond just having an SBOM, what specific metadata should teams be capturing to prove they are compliant?
Yeah, so I can take that. So for anyone who isn't aware of the CRA, or the Cyber Resilience Act, I can give a quick high-level overview. So it's mainly affects anyone distributing software in Europe, which can, like, even if you're a global team, you may have American software or whatever. But if your software makes it to, you have some client or whatever that is deployed in Europe, then you got to be aware of it. It basically outlines a couple of requirements that need to be adhered to when it comes to observability and compliance security in the software you distribute. So at a high level, those are keeping a software bill of materials, so an SBOM, ensuring that you have transparency over the software supply chain, being able to enforce or highlight and protect integrity of the software components. So basically that there's no compromised components, there's no unauthorized modification of software components. And then vulnerability management is a big part of it. So vulnerability management needs to be taken care of throughout the software development lifecycle as well. To do that, and Claire, I'm getting your question in a second, but to do that, you have to have SBOMs. In terms of the specific metadata you would need, and there's no strict requirement, by the way, on which type of SBOM you need. Like, you could pick a format, Cyclone DX, SPDX, whatever, or a custom format. I don't think it really matters according to the wording. But as long as you have important metadata, which is going to be your package name, version, like Perl information, basically, component type, and that's more from a discoverability angle. So you want to be able to go like, okay, so I need to know about this particular package. I need this information to search for it, so the Perl and the component type. Build information, so commit information, build timestamps, build environment, those sort of information. Artifact, hash, provenance information, signatures, all important as well. Again, comes down to trust and observability. And then lastly, vulnerability information. So being able to attribute vulnerability information and being able to search and find vulnerability information. So it's attributing vulnerabilities to dependencies. So I think if you have all of that kind of meets the high level requirements. The enforcement doesn't happen until 2027. I think it's November, December 2027. I forgot. Somebody else will correct me. But even in 2026, like September this year, there are reporting requirements around vulnerabilities according to that act. So it's something that basically everyone needs to be aware of in software. And yeah, you need to be collecting, capturing that information for sure.
Mm.
There's an interesting trend in the regulations because there used to be a reason to slow down. That used to be one of the biggest effects of regulation was, no, we have to stop and do a load of checks. But some of the wording in more recent regulations is talking about your ability to flow a change through to fix a vulnerability in a reasonable time frame. So now regulations are starting to encourage us to actually, work in more frequent cycles and deploy more often and have shorter lead times. I think that's an interesting change in the language around things like this.
Yeah, it's super important. I think, yeah, it's almost like, you can't just treat it like you're ticking a box, right? Like it's not just, oh, I have my components and they're off there somewhere. Kind of like what we said before about you generate an SBOM, but like, what do you do with it? So yeah, I think it's more important than that. It is the right kind of trend, I think, where action could be taken. It's being encouraged that you're tightening up your supply chain.
Yeah, that's a good. I mean, we had a discussion while we were planning this webinar, about SBOMs and working with people, and they get generated and it gets put in a drawer and forgotten about and gathers dust. That's unfortunately the world that we live in. And thank you, by the way, Ralph, for giving an introduction on CRA, all these acronyms flying about. People, yeah, you might not know there's SBOMs and CRA, and let's ban all acronyms. Yeah, so a lot of tools, they do generate SBOMs, but they end up gathering dust. How does Cloudsmith treat an SBOM as like an active living document rather than a static receipt?
Yeah, that's you hit the nail on the head. I think everyone here has regarding SBOMs, and honestly, it's a lot. It's something that a lot of organizations struggle with right now. It's relatively easy to generate an SBOM, right? You've seen it done locally, you've seen it done in pipeline, whatever, if you're testing or you're doing actually generating them in pipeline and just pushing them to an S3 bucket and, like Claire mentioned, having them collect dust. The real challenge, I think for organizations is making it useful, right? After a build is completed, right? I think Cloudsmith does it a little bit differently. We attach the SBOM directly to the artifact, and actually for Docker images, we'll actually create one for you. So you kind of get to but you get to kind of optimize in a way, and kind of let us kind of handle the SBOM generation, at least for Docker images. But for other artifacts like Maven packages or NPM packages, we treat SBOMs as like a first-class citizen when it comes to the artifact, right? So it travels with the package throughout the package's lifecycle rather than being stored in a separate area. And because it's tied to the artifact, the SBOM can actively be included into policies that you include within Cloudsmith, vulnerability monitoring, as Ralph alluded to, dependency analysis. For example, if a new vulnerability is disclosed at a later time, we can actually correlate these, CVE data against the SBOM data dependencies listed within there to identify like what's affected. So instead of it kind of remaining as like almost like a static receipt from the build process, it becomes like a continuous, like useful source of truth, that supports security and operational decisions long after the artifact is initially created, and even on the deployment side, can be kind of built into policy for deployments, right? And again, alluding everything back to that golden path. So yeah, super important SBOMs, and it's great to see the industry kind of enforcing that, and it's
Yeah, thank you, Christian. Anybody else want to jump in on SBOMs before we jump into security and compliance?
Only just to kind of put a pin in this concept of, if you've generated an SBOM, it kind of should be doing something. It's supposed to actually help you solve problems, not just be like a piece of evidence that you store away. So it's so important to do something with it.
Yeah.
100%.
And with that, this is not a test, it's completely anonymous, but our next poll is, so how confident are you that your current SBOM process could satisfy a Cyber Resilience Act audit today? And again, that the CRA, as Ralph said, next year, end of next year, is fine. It's not a test. It will not go to your company. Yeah, so how confident do you feel with your current SBOM process, just so that we can get a feel for where everyone's at? Do they feel really confident? Brilliant? Do you not? Is that where you need a bit more help, a bit more chatting through like problem solution? So that poll is open now. And then we'll pivot into security and compliance. So what happens when a new 0-day vulnerability is announced? So most teams spend days trying to find where they are exposed, but how does Golden Pass change that meantime into discovery?
Yeah, so I could take this one. So I remember, I think I might actually have PTSD from Log4Shell. That was a horrible time, and I wish we knew about Golden Pass stuff in the way we do today in that company whenever I worked there, because we spent a lot of time with Log4Shell. We're a big Java house, lots of Spring and all that. And we spent a lot of time trawling through code and just finding out, writing scripts to try and find where exactly are we exposed and what way are we exposed. And it can be really horrible, to be honest, to be in that experience. And I think what a Golden Path does is it should bake that, and we've said it multiple times now, but it should bake that observability in. Like, that should be part of what you're doing when you're building a Golden Path. You should really be creating an inventory, first of all, and observability then over that inventory. And lastly, then you need automation to act on that observability. So if a new 0-day lands, then you have alarms firing based on automation that says, wow, look, this thing has landed. You have good data sources, maybe that bring in 0-day information. The alarms are blaring all over the place. It's like, okay, you're exposed in this way. And again, the inventory lets you kind of find the exactly which components are affected and in what way they're affected. So it's funny, because it's not, you don't want to just have an amazing alarm system without the data connected to it. But likewise, if you have all the data and you don't have that Golden Path really set up, it's kind of useless, right? Because you're not going to really hear about it. It's not going to be automated. It's not going to be a nice kind of pipeline for that kind of event. So I think it's definitely about, baking it in as much as possible. Just gives you that visibility and, again, that confidence, so that if something does happen, it happens in an automated way, and everybody's aware of it.
Yeah. No, it does. It does. It was just thinking in terms of then going one step further and Golden Pass and quarantining. So Cloudsmith uses obviously a policy engine to enforce rules on licenses and vulnerabilities. Could you explain the concept of quarantine and how it prevents a Golden Path from becoming a delivery vector for bad code? So like the 0-day, if that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. This is actually a feature that our customers love. A quarantine in Cloudsmith essentially blocks a package, a specific package based on name and version that the customer will typically define within a policy. And it's essentially a safety mechanism, right? It will block any pipelines or developers from actually being able to pull the package and put the organization at risk. We have different levers that customers can pull to generate the policies on the actual quarantine triggers. So whether it be EPSS, CVSS scoring, other metadata license restrictions, kind of another big one. Malicious indicators that we're seeing, we can quickly quarantine that. And once quarantined, it's isolated. So as I mentioned, nothing can access it, and it's flagged typically for investigation and remediation. That's when we'll see security teams jump in, the platform, review it, and decide at that point if an exemption policy needs to be put in place or a specific exemption rule. But for the most part, we've seen a lot of success in the quarantine action preventing any bad code from entering production, which would be the worst case scenario, right? So yeah, golden path should only contain the artifacts that have been approved and should not even include, malicious or vulnerable artifacts, according to the risk appetite of the organization. So ensure the golden path stays golden.
Yeah, I love that. And this is a really good example, actually. We were talking just now about the shift left and then shift down. This is how the tools can help you shift some of that load down, because the policy engines and template management, these are tools that are going to help platform engineers get rid of some of that complexity. So they're super, super useful. And we were talking before the call, Cloudsmith and Octopus have both used Rego for their policy engines. So you don't have to learn lots of different ways of doing policies, just super useful. So all good ways of taming some of that complexity and shifting it down onto the tools instead of people having to deal with it.
Yeah, absolutely. The more automation we can kind of, bake in, the better.
Okay. Sorry to cut you off there. You all good? Finished?
Yep, I'm good.
Right, perfect. Okay, I'm just conscious of time. We have 3 minutes left, and we have one question in the side, so I want to make sure that we get to it. So final question is, if we were building a golden path from scratch today, what is the very first handshake you would set up between your artifact repository, so Cloudsmith, and your deployment tool, Octopus Deploy, to ensure that trust is there from source to ship?
Yeah, so I can cover that a little bit. I think we have a couple of screenshots we can throw up on the screen there. So this is actually describing pretty much what Christian has just explained. So I'll not spend too much time on it, but we have SBOMs baked in as like a first-class citizen, as Christian described. If you go to the next screen, we have like policies. As Steve says, we use Rego for our policy enforcement. And those policies allow you to get that automation. So you have that data coming in, vulnerability, license information, SBOM information, and you can create policies based on that. And then once you have a policy, you can act on it. So that's the automation part. You have something that says, okay, I want to add a tag, or I want to quarantine that package. I want to do something about it automatically. So it's not a manual process. It's making it easier for teams, not harder.
Perfect. And Steve, do you want to jump in then? So how does that connect to Octopus Deploy?
Yeah, so we have deployment process templates. So you can create a template that can be used by feature teams that include checks to make sure that what you're about to deploy is got all of those green ticks and that it's passed all those tests. You can prevent a deployment of an artifact that's been banned. And then inside of that, we have a really smart way of versioning these templates. One of the big problems with platforms is that you can create a really great template, and then you end up with copies of that template, and they're all drifting and going out of date, and it's hard to keep them together. So we handle all of that versioning and that update story, and the feature teams can decide when to take automatic updates to the process and when they want to actually time it a bit. So you can give them a grace period for major updates. And then on the policy side, we also use the same technology for policies. So you can have a policy that says nothing should be deployed without calling back home to Cloudsmith to get the green light on this artifact that we want to deploy. So it kind of joins together to make sure that nothing can actually get into production unless all of these lights are green, which is what's super important. And that's going to make your SecOps people very happy.
Awesome.
Thank you for that. That was good to see the start, from source to ship, right at the other end. Christian, sorry, did you have anything you wanted to jump in with there?
No, I was just going to reiterate that, that handshake, we had talked about prior to this call, just, the importance of validating artifact checksums and artifact source. So I'm sure in Octopus Deploy, in those policies, you could, implement a check on those SHA hashes. SBOMs validate that they are coming from Cloudsmith and that no one can bypass that, especially for production deployments.
Yeah, absolutely. You can kind of guarantee that what you're deploying is the thing that you built and the thing that's been checked. And that's super important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you so much. That wraps up the sort of panel Q&A style. We have actually a really interesting question in the side here. So what are some ways to get buy-in to a golden pass? I can see how some devs might see them as a disruption to the way they've been doing things. So what are some of the ways to get buy-in, basically?
It's kind of how you get buy-in for anything. I think, you have to think about what is it that your stakeholders will get from it? What is it that your engineers and stuff will get from it? And it's kind of like, I mentioned the security angle earlier on. I'll kind of reiterate that a bit, is that a lot of, I've seen this personally, as a lot of engineers will think, oh, like security is just going to get in my way. And really, if that security harness is there and it's built in the right way, then it should only make their job easier, and it should only make them faster. And so, like, if that's explained in that way to developers, I think you won't get a problem. Like, that shouldn't be a problem for most developers. And it's similar for for the other stakeholders that might have to weigh in on, like, okay, there's an investment here that needs to be made. It's gonna, at the end of the day, make things faster and better, more secure. Like, we've seen companies that have kind of fallen apart whenever a huge security issue has breached, and it's not, you don't want to be the next company, basically.
Yeah, I think also on that, just in customer success, we like to focus on measurable or quantifiable business metrics, right? Proving the value through business successes, and if you could essentially tie this project to faster development or improvements in developer experience, actual quantifiable metrics that you can, present. I think that's also worth mentioning as well.
Yeah, thank you both for that. Just ahead, I know we're a little bit over time, but we're nearly finished, I promise. So which best describes your team's current relationship with your golden path? The majority said paved but optional. So we have a recommended path, but developers often bypass it. And then we had literally a running total of joint between non-existent or fragmented or true golden paths, right down to I have no idea what golden paths are. So we have a real mixed bag there. So that's good. I mean, it tells us that the topic is a very topical one today. Okay, so we have, thank you very much, Steve, Christian, and Ralph. We had up on the screen there our Cloud Native Digest, and we also, Octopus Deploy, have an upcoming webinar but Steve, you're jumping on presenting again with your colleague Charlotte. So that's on April the 1st, and you'll also find us both at KubeCon. So our booth number, Cloudsmith booth number is 570. Octopus Deploy is 670, so that makes it easy to remember. So we hope to see you all there at KubeCon. And thank you very much for taking the time, Steve, Christian, Ralph, really appreciated it. We got through all the questions there, sort of in time, so that's good.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you, everybody, for joining, and enjoy your day.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Bye-bye.